Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Missable Macbeth Moments. Today we'll be talking about if what's done really is done, or if it may come back to haunt us. During this series, I aim to discuss a small moment from the play that on further reading does hold more significance than you first think. I'll also be linking to wider themes and concepts, and I'll be making links to different scenes across the play. Today I want to focus on the character of Lady Macbeth and the fact that she has one of the biggest character arcs in the play. In fact, I would argue she has the biggest character arc. And what I mean by that is that she changes the most. She starts off as a dominant, megalomaniacal character, and then during the course of the play, she becomes the weaker one in the relationship, the more submissive one, and by the end, she is ridden with guilt. And she really isn't a strong person. She apparently commits suicide, but we'll talk more about that later. And of course, in the eyes of the audience, they go from hating this woman to eventually feeling some pity for her. Maybe. In Act 3, Scene 2, it's the time when Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have been crowned king and queen. They've just returned from Scone Palace, where they've been crowned. And Lady Macbeth is very happy with that. All she wanted was to become queen. All she wanted was to kill Duncan and get the crown. Once that happens, she is happy. However, Macbeth cannot rest. He has an unsettled mind, full of scorpions is his mind, of course, and he's turned his attention to plotting the murder of Banquo and Fleance. And when he's very upset, he's kind of talking to her about how he feels like they've scorched the snake and not killed it. She says to him, "Using those thoughts which should indeed have died with them, they think on. Things without all remedy should be without regard. What's done is done." So what she's saying here is that she doesn't think there can be a remedy to what they've done. So why bother thinking about it anymore? If you can't fix it, then don't even think about it anymore. Leave it in the past. And what's done is done. She's accepted her actions. She doesn't feel any guilt apparently about it, and she just thinks that they shouldn't dwell on it and that they should just move on. In the eyes of the Jacobin audience, she would seem very unrepentant. She seems like she doesn't think she needs to atone. She doesn't have any sins apparently on her mind that are troubling her conscience. And therefore she seems quite happy. Now that's one interpretation of this scene. Another one could be that maybe she is fighting a private battle with her guilty conscience. But maybe in this scene she's just trying to calm Macbeth down, and she's trying to, play it cool and act as though she's not bothered by what they've done. But maybe she really is. Now, between that scene and the last scene where we see Lady Macbeth, which is Act 5, Scene 1, we only see her in the banquet scene, so Act 3, Scene 4. We don't actually see her in the entirety of Act 4. And during the banquet scene, she seems a little bit more rattled, but still quite steadfast. She's still telling Macbeth to, she's accusing him of not being a man, and she's going back to her old tricks and methods of manipulation. And then when we get to Act 5, Scene 1, which is the next time we see her and the last time we see her, she's a completely changed woman. She's sleepwalking, sleep talking, sleep washing, and she's speaking things from her inner soul, from her conscience. Of course, she is unconscious, she's sleeping. And I did have to Google that, but apparently when you are sleeping, you are in a state of unconsciousness. And so you could argue that these are her innermost true thoughts. They're really coming from her kind of deepest thoughts. And I think this is where we hear the truth. And I love what Shakespeare has done here with the repetition of this line and the slight tweak. So she says, to bed, there's knocking at the gate. Come, 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 give me your hand. What's done cannot be undone. To bed, to bed, to bed. So if you look at the lines here I've highlighted in red, what's done cannot be undone. And of course she's just said, what's done is done, 2 acts before. She's gone through some sort of process here, clearly, where she has accepted her guilt. She is ready to accept her fate. It's very, very soon after this that she dies. So these are her last lines of the play, to bed, to bed, to bed. And it's very much implied here that she's about to kill herself. We get told by Malcolm in the last scene of the play that she has died by self and violent hands. That is why, many, many interpretations show her committing suicide. I do kind of warn my students, we can't believe that fully. You might have heard the quote that history is told by the victors, which means that, Malcolm has an agenda in telling people that she committed suicide. He is trying to tarnish the reputations of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So of course it suits his purpose to tell everyone that she committed the mortal sin of suicide. We don't know if she did commit suicide. All we know from Act 5, Scene 5 is that there is a cry of women. We hear women screaming, and then the doctor comes in and tells Macbeth that the Queen is dead. The doctor doesn't say through what cause, just that she's dead. And then we get told by Malcolm that it was suicide. So you take from that what you want, but I'm just kind of warning you, be careful of just writing suicide in an essay. There is scope here to kind of look into that and explore that a bit wider. But what's very clear in this scene is that she is now ready to repent and show remorse. And as I said, I love how Shakespeare directly contrasts these lines and kind of just tweaks them very, very subtly to show the audience that she has changed. Okay, so linking out to wider themes and motifs, we have the theme of guilt and the motif of blood. So her guilt has clearly grown across the play. Her and Macbeth, really interestingly, they switch roles. And it seems to be that as one of them kind of grows in power, they also lessen their guilt. So let me talk you through it. So at the start of the play, Macbeth has very little power. He is being bullied, he is being manipulated, he's being emasculated by his wife. She's the one calling the shots. And he actually feels a lot of guilt. If we look at 2.2 and 2.1, actually, even before he kills Duncan, he has a lot of guilt. He's talking about the blood on his hands. He's saying that he thinks that it will take all of Neptune's water to rid him of that blood on his hands. And Lady Macbeth has all the power at the start, but therefore she doesn't really have much guilt. And actually, as I said, her guilt doesn't really grow until 5.1, which is the last scene. And I love how they switch roles in that way. What I also like is that in the course of Act 5, Scene 1, Lady Macbeth seems to relive the main things that have caused her guilt. She makes references to Duncan's murder, who knew the old man had so much blood in him, but she also references the death of Lady Macduff. The Thane of Fife had a wife, where is she now? And I really like that way that she feels responsible for the death of Lady Macduff and Lady Macduff's son and household, because she created the monster, and then of course Macbeth, after being turned into that monster, has gone and decided to kill several more people. She had no control over that, but you could say that she pushed him into that first murder and therefore taught him that that was okay. And then we have the motif of blood. So the motif of blood, the blood on her hands symbolizes her guilt. It would be really good to write in an essay that the blood is a manifestation of her guilt or a manifestation of her regret, guilty conscience. And it's very similar to when Macbeth sees Banquo's ghost. You can also describe that as a manifestation of his guilty conscience as well. And then lastly, it's really, really good to talk about the kind of rules of tragedy. This is a tragedy play. It does follow the rules of tragedy. I would recommend that you do some wider reading on this if this is an aspect that you're not kind of confident with. But I'll just talk through a couple of the key points. So in a tragedy, you have a tragic hero that makes a mistake. Often they are greedy and they want something that they shouldn't have. They then get that thing and then they have to pay for that in some way, and of course that normally ends in their death. If we think about some of the very classic Greek tragedies, we have heroes such as Prometheus, who want more than they're supposed to have. Prometheus steals fire from the gods of Olympus and he tries to give it to mankind, but because he's not supposed to have fire, he must pay the punishment for that. And the punishment of Prometheus is extremely gory if you want to go and look that up. But In this way, Lady Macbeth has to die. It's just something that has to happen to fulfill the tragedy. So you could argue that it's her hubris that could be her hamartia. So hamartia being a fatal flaw that leads to a downfall, and hubris meaning excessive pride or ambition. She wants more than she should have. She's not supposed to be queen. She's not in line to be queen, and she gets something she should never have, and therefore she does have to die. She has to, you know, be punished for that sin of wanting more, and obviously for the sin of killing a king as well. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and that you've learned something. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, going into deep dives of quotes, and maybe the quotes that you wouldn't necessarily look into with your teacher in class, then do check out my other videos on my channel, and I will be bringing out more and more. Thanks for watching.